Joe Colombo was the head of the Colombo crime family, a mob boss who was head of one of the legendary 5 families that ran the mafia in New York, until he was shot on the street in 1971 and died from those injuries in 1978. But for Colombo's son and a local author, that explanation doesn't quite work. They believe Colombo was killed by someone or something else, perhaps even at the behest of the government. Author Capria makes that argument in a new book, Colombo, the Unsolved Murder. I recently sat down with Capria and asked, even if their claims are true, why should anyone outside the Colombo family really care? Big picture question first, because the book alleges that there was either a conspiracy or a cover-up in the investigation into his murder. I'm wondering why people at home would care, and I don't mean that to dismiss the book. I'm just asking because a lot of people may say even if something amiss happened with the investigation, well, he's a mob boss, one of the heads of the 5 families, maybe justice was served in the end anyway.
Yeah, the book is not really to show the justice on Joe Colombo and whether he should have had his life or his shooting. I think not the redemption, but the cold case story is what would make it most interesting. That for anyone in America and TV and in film, we always love a good story about something that's being opened back up and there's some missing parts, because when you're talking about a conspiracy and the possible involvement of either a black civil rights group that wanted to kill him or the FBI or CIA or another mob boss, you know, there's a lot of interesting stories that come out of the fold when you start to open up the case.
Who was, to your mind, Joe Colombo? Was he a mob boss? Was he more than that? And why would the feds have an interest in gunning him down? Or why would a black civil rights group want to gun him down?
To me, Joe Colombo was a leader. That's what he was. He was born to be a leader, and I think that whether it was leader of a political party, whether it was a leader of his neighborhood, the head of his household, or a mob organization, that's what he was destined to become. I think that the government and the struggle that they had with Joe Colombo was that he was very charismatic and he gained control of the people in the Italian-American community in New York and then beyond because he was such a good leader.
In the course of your research in the book, give me 1 or 2 bullet points, pardon the pun, that indicate that Colombo may have been involved, there may have been a conspiracy or a cover-up related to his murder.
Yeah, I mean, the investigation, one of the key points that I found most interesting was when I started researching some news tapes, which a lot of my information came from news media sources, I noticed that there was a struggle between the chief of detectives, Albert Seidman, and the head of the organized crime task force on the federal side, Daniel P. Holman. They were completely disagreeing with who was behind the shooting of Joe Colombo. Now, while Seidman's story ended up becoming the most popular story in the news, it was only because he was the chief of detectives from New York. He had a lot of power and access in the New York media, and Holman only did a few interviews, and the federal government wasn't supposed to be investigating the murder. But the fact that those two were disagreeing and had contradicting stories, that's really where I started to see that, look, no one really knows what happened here, and I think that they just wanted to, instead of exhausting all the possibilities in this case, they really wanted to just pin it, the NYPD, on a mob shooting.
That disagreement in approaches, in investigative approaches, is that dissimilar from what we see in other cases? Is it something that stood out to you because of that disagreement?
Yeah, I mean, that was only one thing, was the disagreement. It was mainly based on facts and evidence where, you know, Seidman was ignoring the facts and continuously telling the public that he was close to an arrest. And after 45 years, there was never an arrest. So I think Holman had a whole different approach to how to investigate this thing, but could never really do it because he was at the federal level. And again, this was investigated at the state level.
What, to your mind, was the biggest surprise as you were looking back at this murder?
I know when Colombo was shot, there was about 15 to 20 police officers right in that circle. And somehow I tracked down the police officer that tackled Jerome Johnson, smashed the gun out of his hand, and ended up taking Jerome Johnson to the hospital when he was toe tagged. Same hospital, Roosevelt Hospital that Colombo was in. I interviewed the police officer who did all this, and he told me that when I said to him, you know, when was the last time you were interviewed for this case? He told me in the 45 years he had never been interviewed by the FBI, by the NYPD about the shooting. And that, to me, just shows signs of something that was a conspiracy.
Very interesting, and an interesting read is ready. The book is Colombo, the Unsolved Murder. Capria, thanks so much, and thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
We'll take a quick break. When we come back, our Hudson Valley headlines.